Right now, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, there is a ship the length of 4 football fields carrying enough cargo to fill a mid-sized city's worth of stores. It belongs to one of 3 companies. The ship next to it also belongs to one of 3 companies, and the one behind that. You have been told that the global supply chain is this impossibly complex web of thousands of players. But when you follow the actual cargo, when you trace the actual route, you keep arriving at the same 3 front doors. This is the story of how 3 private companies quietly swallowed the arteries of the modern world. Think about everything you own: your phone, your furniture, your food. At some point, almost all of it crossed an ocean inside a steel box. And because global trade involves hundreds of countries, thousands of ports, and millions of individual shipments, most people assume the system moving all of it must be enormous and distributed, a kind of commercial democracy where power is spread across hundreds of competing players. It is not. The ocean freight industry, the actual backbone of physical global trade, is dominated by 3 shipping conglomerates. Maersk, based in Denmark. MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company, technically headquartered in Switzerland but founded by an Italian family. And CMA-CGM, a French giant based in Marseille. Together, these 3 companies control somewhere between 90 and 95% of global container shipping capacity on the most critical trade lanes. Not a third, not half, 95%. The rest of the market is carved up by a handful of smaller Asian carriers who, as you will see, are not really independent either. This didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen by accident. Go back to the 1980s. Container shipping was genuinely competitive. There were dozens of mid-sized carriers slugging it out on trans-Pacific and transatlantic routes. Margins were thin, rates were volatile, and no single company had the power to move markets. It looked like a healthy industry. Then came the consolidation wave. It started slowly in the 1990s with small mergers and route-sharing agreements. Then it accelerated dramatically after 2000, and especially in the 20-teens, as shipping economics became brutally unforgiving. Building a modern, ultra-large container vessel costs upwards of $200 million. Filling that vessel requires a global network of port relationships, inland logistics partnerships, and sales operations that take decades to build. Smaller carriers simply could not compete at that scale. They were absorbed, acquired, or bankrupted. Maersk bought Sealand. CMA, CGM absorbed APL and NOL. MSC grew more organically but aggressively, quietly assembling the world's largest fleet almost without the financial press noticing. By 2020, the top 10 carriers had shrunk to effectively 3 power centers. The rest of the industry was restructured around them. But raw consolidation only tells half the story. The other half is something called shipping alliances, and this is where it gets truly strange. In almost any other industry, if 3 dominant competitors sat down and agreed to coordinate their routes, share their ships, and divide up the market between them, that meeting would end with handcuffs. It would be called a cartel. It would be illegal. In shipping, it is called an alliance, and it is perfectly legal. The 3 major alliances, the Gemini cooperation between Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd, the MSC anchored network, and the Ocean Alliance led by CMA-CGM, operate under specific antitrust exemptions that were written into law decades ago. The original logic was that shipping is so capital intensive and so globally critical that some level of cooperation was necessary to maintain reliable service. That logic may have been reasonable in 1975. Today, it functions as a moat, protecting the incumbents from any serious challenge. Within these alliances, competitors share vessel space on each other's ships. They coordinate departure schedules. They effectively decide together which ports get served and how often. A shipper in Vietnam trying to get cargo to Rotterdam has no meaningful choice outside the alliance structure. The menu is controlled by the same kitchen no matter which restaurant you walk into. So why can't a new competitor simply build ships and undercut them? Because the barrier to entry isn't just capital, it is time. A new shipping line doesn't just need ships, it needs berthing priority at congested ports, relationships that take decades to negotiate, inland logistics, partnerships in dozens of countries, a global sales force, a technology stack, a container fleet, and the financial resilience to survive the inevitable downturns when freight rates crash below operating cost. Maersk spent over 100 years building that infrastructure. MSC spent 50. A new entrant would need $10 billion just to begin, and a decade of losses before it approached relevance. The network effect in shipping is nearly impenetrable. The big three don't just have advantages, they have advantages that compound the larger they get. And here is the part most people miss entirely. These companies stopped being just shipping lines years ago. Maersk has explicitly stated its ambition to become an integrated logistics company. They now own warehouses, air freight capacity, customs brokerage firms, and last-mile delivery networks. CGM purchased a major stake in La Meridionale and acquired Siva Logistics, one of the world's largest third-party logistics providers. MSC purchased an African rail network and took control of the passenger cruise line brand. What this means is that the same three companies that move your cargo across the ocean increasingly want to manage it from the factory floor to your front door. They are not just controlling the ocean leg, they are building ownership positions across the entire physical supply chain. Port terminals, cold chain logistics, inland trucking, freight forwarding, the choke points are multiplying. The clearest proof of this market power came in 2021. When pandemic-era consumer demand exploded, the container shipping system buckled. Ports congested, containers piled up inland, ship schedules collapsed. And in that chaos, something remarkable happened. Freight rates did not rise modestly. They did not double. They increased by a factor of 10 in some lanes almost overnight. Shipping a container from Shanghai to Rotterdam went from $1,500 to over $10,000. That pricing power only exists in a market that is structurally incapable of generating competitive pressure fast enough to matter. The three companies did not conspire to raise rates. They did not have to. When you control 95% of the capacity and capacity is suddenly scarce, the market does the work for you. Their collective profits in 2021 and 2022 exceeded the combined profits of the entire previous decade. Here is the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all of this. The consolidation of global shipping was not a conspiracy. It was the logical outcome of an industry that rewards scale above everything else. Governments allowed it because it made trade cheaper and more reliable for decades. Consumers benefited from low freight costs embedded in the price of everything they bought. But the system optimized for efficiency created something else entirely. It created concentration so extreme that when it breaks, there is no redundancy. There is no competitor waiting to absorb the load. There is just the queue, the congestion, and the invoice. No redundancy is not an abstraction, it is a real problem for supply resilience and prices. The next time you wonder why the price of everything went up overnight, remember that somewhere on the Pacific, a ship the length of 4 football fields is deciding your answer, and it belongs to 3 companies.